The economy of Brazil is in turmoil. There are calls for impeachment of President Rousseff. There's a corruption scandal. It's almost a perfect storm of turbulence in that country. This is Steve Wiseman at the Peterson Institute for International Economics with Monica de Bolle to discuss the latest situation. First of all, Monica, thank you for joining us. Tell us first, what's the latest news from Brazil?
Well, the latest news is we have the unfolding corruption scandal together with a political crisis that is paralyzing the country. The paralysis can already be seen in the main macroeconomic indicators. So activity in the second quarter has slumped by 3% compared to last year. Unemployment is up to 7.5%. Doesn't seem like much when you compare Brazil's unemployment rate to other problems in labor markets around the world, except for the fact that in December 2014, unemployment was at an all-time low of 4%. So it's gone up from 4 to 7.5 within the span of only a few months. People are very dissatisfied, so there are protests going on, demonstrations going on around the country. The president is extremely weak, very low approval ratings. So as you say, it is a perfect storm. We have a big corruption scandal, huge political crisis, and a big economic mess to deal with.
So let's unpack this. Is there any way of simply saying how things could have gotten so bad so quickly?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, on the one hand, on the economic front at least, Brazil is very much in the grip of a chronicle of a crisis foretold. I mean, over the last few years, a lot of people have been calling attention to the imbalances and to the policy mistakes and to the mismanagement that was going on in the economy, and that this was eventually going to come to a head. It did. The problem is that it all came to a head together with a corruption scandal and a political crisis, which makes the situation all the more daunting.
Just make a detour for a second to explain what the corruption scandal is.
The corruption scandal is essentially something that is not new. Petrobras, the oil company, has been up in the midst of corruption scandals throughout the last several decades in Brazil. And it's all to do with bribery schemes and graft and just passing around money for various interests to get projects at Petrobras, to get special deals for construction companies. The latest, though, is that some of this money has now been channeled directly to political parties, so to fund political parties, and there are alleged funding of campaigns and things of that nature. And the sheer size of the briberies involved in the numbers that we're talking about are mind-blowing.
Have they touched her and her presidency?
They have, in a way, because people do realize that these things have happened in a way under her watch. She was the chairwoman of the board at Petrobras under President Lula's administration, and she was before that the Minister for Mining and Energy. So it's difficult to see how in some way she wasn't aware of what was going on within the company. But things have not touched her to the extent that they have touched other politicians. There are other politicians allegedly that have received money from Petrobras directly in the form of bribes. This has not happened. There's no evidence to that regarding President Rousseff.
Well, let's come back to her agenda for how to get the country out of this mess. Just describe its major points.
Well, she started off by calling in an extremely competent finance minister, someone with extremely good credentials, Minister Joaquim Levy, who came in with a plan to restore fiscal sustainability, so a very strong fiscal adjustment this year and in 2016, and also a plan to, in a way, reduce what Brazilians have learned to call patrimonialism, which is really the involvement of public banks with the private sector and this whole mess that has become public sector lending in Brazil. What has happened, though, is that both agendas have been watered down. So on the fiscal side, in a sense, because the economy is doing so badly, but also because there have been demands to sort of, not do a fiscal adjustment as strong as the one that was being proposed, the fiscal consolidation plan has been watered down. At the same time, since the country is in the grip of a very, very serious recession, with the prospect that it might even contaminate 2016, and that would be a first since the Great Depression, 2 years of GDP contraction in Brazil. The government has now resorted to using the public banks once again to get the economy going. So in a way, that agenda has been watered down, and it was initially the way out. Now there's the political crisis that's brewing, and the president has had to basically come up with some kind of pact or agreement with one of the leaders of her coalition, and that pact is somewhat flimsy because this leader of the opposition is allegedly involved in the bribery scandals as well.
I see.
So the ways, the sort of things that are being construed to come out of the crisis don't seem to be very solid.
Well, is fiscal consolidation the answer for Brazil? And if so, what are the prospects for that happening?
Well, fiscal consolidation is most certainly one of the ways out for Brazil. It has to at least do that. Then it has to do a lot of other things. And one of the other major things it needs to do is rethink the role of these public banks in the economy, because they do create a number of distortions and they make policy making very difficult apart from anything else. So these two things do need to be handled. Now, the problem is that once you're in the grip of a political crisis and you have no public support or political support, it becomes very difficult to see how any of these things are going to advance. So I fear that we're headed for a full-fledged crisis before some of these things start being dealt with.
Not a happy prospect, but thanks for being realistic about it. Thanks a lot, Monica.
Thank you.